Back in the 50s, we'd never had it so good, although some of us had never had it at all. Great Britain was going to get greater. Everyone was going to have cars and money. So they took a load of Geordies, Scots and Cockneys out of the rundown mines and the shipyards and dumped them in the middle of green and pleasant England. They built a new town and called it Telford. Their kids were going to grow up happy, healthy and well paid, making car door seals for British Leyland. 20 years later.
Welcome to part 5 of Telford the Ultimate Guide. In this video we take a look at Brookside, the Telford Development Corporation's third largest housing estate. As Woodside approached completion, in 1968 preparation had already begun on Brookside. Brookside was built in 4 distinct phases. By 1969 the oval-shaped ring road was constructed, almost creating an island around the existing windmill farm. By 1971, 371 houses were completed and a further 428 were under construction. On the 14th of July 1972, the Duke of Edinburgh came to look at the progress of the TDC's latest housing estate. The Duke was greeted by hundreds of the residents of this rapidly expanding housing development. On this day, Brookside stood still. Builders gazed from the scaffolding on the half-completed flats in Burford. The Duke was given a tour of the recently completed local centre. He then went on to view purpose-built older people accommodation. months later, the national builders' strike and the infamous flying pickets came to Brookside, causing thousands of pounds worth of damage.
Well, we had a quite unprecedented visit here by a militant band of men who turned up in several coaches. There are various estimates of the strength, but we think it was about 250. And these men were armed with pick halves and various lumps of wood, and they rampaged through two sites that we've got here, causing a lot of damage, which is very difficult for us to estimate because some of the damage is to machinery, which we won't know fully the extent of it until we get down into the machinery and strip it down. But the visible damage we can see is probably of the order of nearly £2,000. We're very concerned, however, about the effects on our men who've been very intimidated and frightened by this. Two men actually went to hospital, and one of them is still detained in hospital with wounds to the head. And all our men here had violence done to them in one shape or another. They were on scaffolding and were forced down from scaffolding. Bricks were thrown at them, bricks were thrown at windows, and a great deal of wild and vicious talking went on throughout the whole of the incident, which lasted probably over an hour. Well, we've had probably something in the order of 30 men have turned up to continue work, and those men are working at the moment. The site is open for work. All our staff are here. We're very anxious to continue the work, which is important to the Telford Development Corporation, and we want to assure all the men that work for us here that we are keeping the site open. The men who are here and have turned up at the office this morning, they're very frightened, they're very scared about what happened yesterday, and rightly so and understandably so, but we feel that with the police cooperation which we look forward to receiving here, that those men ought to be able to come to work and earn a living without fear of being attacked by violent bullies.
The 30 men who did turn up for work today were far too frightened to tell us what had happened. They're afraid that if they air their views publicly, then they'll be subjected to even further attacks. But privately, they're angered and alarmed by the whole situation. They say that their take-home pay is already above the amount the union is asking for, and they also say that they should have the right to work without interference from the militants.
The next clip gives more details why the strike was held.
The difference between a site where you've got trade union organisation and the shop stewards continually go into management with issues of safety, and the management here, we're pleased to say, immediately deal with it. But where you got a job which is full of a lump, where they're working in small units, the men are literally working for a small employer, then they're a law unto themselves. They don't care whether there's a toe board missing from here or a handrail missing up there. That means work to replace it. And their attitude is, well, that's not my job, that's somebody else's. Let me get on with the job of earning a lump sum payment, you see. And of course, the whole situation of safety deteriorates where the lump labour is operating.
I am satisfied that you were the leaders and the prime movers in the invasion of these sites. You took part in violence, you encouraged violence. I regard you as arrogant, vicious, and prepared to impose your views on others by violence if need be. You have the power of speech and the power of leadership which you apparently used to ill purpose. You thought you could flout the law. You were wrong.
The early streets of Brookside were designed with the Radburn principle in mind. The TDC's architects decided that the remaining 34 acres would be designed in a completely different way.
One thing that did change is on this estate, Brookside, the areas of Birchmoor, they changed the road system completely. So the original Radburn principle was gone. No straight roads into the estate. This was designed to slow the traffic down. So you can see we've got these cobble lined streets here which wind in and out of the street just to slow. So this was very, very different for the estate, and also it slowed the traffic right down. And here you've had predominantly 3 and 4 bedroom houses, as you can see.
The areas of Burnside, Birchmoor and Briarwood contained 471 houses, roughly 14 homes per acre. There were 5 different 2, 3 and 4 bedroom homes designs used. In June 1972, the first families moved on to Brookside. Brookside got its name from the nearby Madbrook, which means beside the brook. The estate had a 1.7 mile ring road around it. The Brookside estate had 3 schools. One primary school called Brindleyford, which has since been demolished and replaced with social housing. There was also a junior school known as Brookside Middle School. This has now evolved into the Windmill Primary School, affectionately named after the farm that was demolished to make way for Brookside. There was also a 3rd school catering for children with special needs called Thomas Parker School. This has now been renamed to the Homer Lake Primary School. The estate had its own pub called the Lakeside Tavern. It opens its doors in December 1977. The tavern was built on the site that was meant to be the grand landscaped entrance to Homer Lake. The children of Brookside were well catered for, with both a play centre and a youth club. There was also various parks and play areas around the estate. The largest park was situated in Brindleyford and included a football court and the steepest slide on Brookside. The estate was designed in such a way that pedestrians never came into contact with the external ring road. This was achieved with an extensive network of footpaths and underpasses. The design code was highlighted within the Radburn principle. Brookside was the last estate to feature the Radburn principle. The redesigned 4th phase of Brookside set the precedent for the future TDC estates. Brookside was completed in 1973. Over the decades, it suffered neglect and certain houses became too expensive for the Housing Trust to maintain. This eventually led to many houses being auctioned off in Stoke-on-Trent and was subsequently purchased by buy-to-let investors. Unfortunately, this resulted in the housing deteriorating further through lack of investment by some landlords. This created a situation where the environment became unsavoury and unpleasant for some long-term residents. In some cases, residents were living on streets where houses were boarded up. Although the Housing Trust reinvested the money made from the auctions into new properties elsewhere, it did nothing to help the plight of the long-term Brookside residents. Brookside needed help.
One of the places that I grew up on as a kid was this road here, which is Bishopdale in Brookside. Now you can see I lived on the top house, which I think was number 34, and this is where I grew up and played during probably a lot during the late 70s and 1980s as well. And this was kind of a very close-knit community here, and you can see what happens with properties now, how they end up going derelict and stuff like that. And when I moved on to Brookside, it was only a few years old, and it was a really nice place. It was really nicely kept, but it shows what happens over these years and how you can see that some people look after the houses, some don't, but that's kind of just the way it is, isn't it? So what did us kids do when we lived on these big gigantic TDC houses and estates? Well, we had places like this. This is called the Dip. Now I spent many years here playing, building rope swings, etc. What an ace. We never really knew what it was about, what actually the Dip was for, but it was great for sledging, going down on your bike, etc., tree climbing. I spent a lot of years playing here in this little dip.
The help came in 2013, where the Telford Wrekin Council pledged £6 million on a new local centre with shops and a community hub. Clearance started late 2013 with the demolition of the flats in Beaconsfield and Burford, along with the local centre. The 46-week contract awarded to Pavers Construction was worth £3 million, with a cutting-edge design by architect Bart Harris Newell. The project consisted of a parade of new shops and a community hub called Brookside Central. Brookside Central was opened on June the 21st, 2014. Additionally, the Wrekin Housing Trust, Brookside's largest landlord, created 18 new 1- and 2-bedroom bungalows on the site of the old flats. This is testament to the Wrekin Housing Trust and the Council's continued investment in Brookside.
We're here at Brookside Central. This is an amazing new area for Brookside, for the community of Brookside. And you can see you've got Brookside Central here and the recharge. This is a community centre, a community hub for people to come together. But also, we've also got a small shopping precinct there as well, with a little supermarket, a fish and chip shop and a hair and tanning studio, which all were on Brookside originally in the 80s. But in the 80s, Brookside Central, well that's what we called it, had a different, it was sort of an indoor shopping centre that was, but it shows how much it's changed. I mean, this is a really nice area for people to come to and the community to meet, and I think it's all part of the continued investment in the town by our local council. Beaconsfield on Brookside, and here is the Windmill Primary School. It wasn't called the Windmill Primary School when I was here, it was called Brookside Middle School, and that's the school that I went to. And why it's called Windmill Primary School is because of the original windmill farm that used to be on the site here. But as you pan around, you can see these beautiful new bungalows that have been built here. They've been built on the site of the original flats that were here, and trust me, Brookside has got a lot of blocks of flats, but how lovely has that been done there? And you can see just down the bottom there, right where the oak tree is, you can see the Brookside, the new Brookside Centre, which has been completely revamped.
Three structures on Brookside Avenue which are rarely used. As you can see with the undergrowth in the back there, it's an attraction for unsociable behaviour. We have had reports on the three underpasses alone of 100 incidents back in 2016, and as part of that we're looking to infill the underpasses that we see here. This particular underpass is going to be infilled with foaming concrete and blocked off with brickwork at either end. It'll take about 20 loads of concrete to fill the structure, and then we'll raise the ground levels either side of the underpass to enable people to have a lot more pleasant crossing of the road.
I think we can all agree that the Brookside we see today is all about community. The new local centre has given the pride back to the once neglected 1970s housing estate. All Brookside needs is the residents to take pride in their environment and embrace the wonderful community.